A plain white envelope rests at the very top of the tall stack of mail. It doesn't wear the same crisp labels or typed addresses the rest of them do. Instead, its surface is smudged, almost grubby at the edges, as if small fingers had carried it a while before letting it go. The assistant almost sends it to the shred pile. There's no return address, no corporate seal, no relevance at first glance. But one word slows her hand. In crooked, uneven red letters, someone has written, urgent. That pause changes everything. She places the envelope on the CEO's desk, a single note of disorder inside a symphony of precision. Alistair Finch rules the 40th floor of his company's glass tower. No sound dares intrude here. Not the horns bleeding through the avenues far below, not the chatter that buzzes on every other level. His office is silent, temperature steady, every line of furniture refusing clutter. He thrives in it. His days are measured in coffee poured dark and black, figures lined in charts, columns marching across endless documents. Every element fits into his grid where performance can be counted, predicted, shaped. Nothing personal lasts long in this place. Cards from clients are filed, then discarded. Handwritten notes never make it past the doorway. The fortress rises on what can be explained in numbers and returns. That morning begins no differently. Alistair slides into his chair, nodding once at the coffee set exactly where he likes it. He surveys reports, containers of proof confirming the health of markets and branches. But there, leaning without schedule, sits that envelope. Smudged edges, red words scrawled urgent. It doesn't belong. It waits, an itch on the spotless surface of his desk. He glances once, then dismisses it with a swift shift of his hand. Random anomalies hold no standing here. In his world of clean accounts and quarterly targets, it is nothing more than nonsense pressed into paper. The day moves forward the way he likes. Meetings clipped to the minute, projections answered, challenges folded back into solutions. Yet as the hours pass, something in his awareness won't leave him alone. That envelope. The casual dismissal should have buried it along with dozens of irrelevant letters. Instead, each time he looks away, he feels it behind him. A faint tug in the room's still air. Late in the afternoon, when the hum of the city seeps just faintly through the glass wall, Alistair tries to focus again on data figures. But his eyes betray him. They keep floating toward the uneven handwriting. That handwriting doesn't look like anything that belongs in this building. It stumbles and shapes, carries a shaky rhythm. To him it is innocent, yet stubborn. A memory answers such handwriting. Not in detail, but in sensation. He sees his younger self hunched over a cheap kitchen table, trying hard to make letters fit straight. He remembers sending one into the world, a letter that never found its reader. An ache rests in his chest before he pushes it down, tensing his jaw. He does not allow the past to break into this tower of the present. And still, the smell hits him. Soft. Strange. Unexpected. He leans closer. It isn't coffee or waxed paper. A faint sweetness streams from the envelope, like the crayon dust that clings to paper after pressed too heavy. He wonders whether he imagined it, whether his mind only conjures what it wants to escape into. But the effect loosens something inside him. He lifts the envelope, testing its lightness between his fingers. Thin. There can't be much inside. A single sheet, maybe. The corners are worn, like it traveled without armor. He lets it rest again at the edge. Silence creeps into the office. His protocol is clear. Such mail belongs in disregard. Yet he doesn't move. He studies that red word, urgent. Crooked strokes that ignore neatness. A sigh escapes him. Rare. Unplanned. He slices the envelope open slowly with a practiced hand, more tentative than usual. The corners resist a little. As the paper slides free, he notices lined notebook stock, the kind pulled from school folders. A corner shows a tiny flick of color, childlike, as if sunlight tried to fit itself in. The page shakes in his grip, not because of its weight, but because he realizes the first crack has already formed. The paper he draws out is ruled in the pale blue lines of a school notebook. The top corner carries a sun drawn in orange crayon, a circle with rays that angle out unevenly, some longer, some shorter, each made with a determined hand. The childish drawing glows against the white expanse of the page, a wordless introduction. Then his eyes settle on the first set of letters written carefully below it, rounded and earnest, slanting and uneven, but steady in their attempt at formality. "Dear Mr.," it begins, though some letters lean too far, others trail off. He feels the weight of the greeting more than its flaws. The voice echoes in his mind, not as ink marks, but as the hesitant sound of a little girl speaking through her pencil, hoping she would be heard. Her name comes quickly. Lily. 8 years old. She's tried to sound like an adult, lining up her sentences neatly, connecting them with stiff phrases she picked up from teachers or books. Yet the child shows through, unmistakable. She describes her home on a little street with a cracked sidewalk. She says there is a cat she doesn't own but feeds anyway because it follows her home after school. Her words are filled with tiny details only a child would include. A swing that squeaks, a neighbor who waters flowers too much, the sound her classroom's clock makes when everyone is quiet during tests. Alistair reads slower than usual. He is accustomed to scanning lines for figures, cutting quickly toward conclusions. But here he moves carefully, as though each uneven loop of ink were fragile. He pictures her, head bent over the ruled sheet, chewing the end of a pencil, whispering the sounds of words under her breath to check if they were right. Even the small missteps, letters reversed, odd gaps, carry warmth. They testify to effort and faith that words matter. In her tone he hears politeness, a practiced kind of carefulness, as though she knows adults expect tidiness and respect. She writes that she goes to school every day, that her teacher likes her drawings, and that she wants to do well so her mother smiles. The description breathes simple pride, soft and unguarded, the kind that does not imagine anyone might mock her honesty. But the letter shifts. Slowly, like a cloud moving in front of the drawn sun, her sentences carry shadows. She talks about evenings at home, a kitchen table with papers spread across it. She mentions numbers, though she never names them. Instead, she describes those numbers almost as creatures. The numbers on the papers, she writes, make Mama's face get small. That line roots him to the page. A child trying to capture in words the shrinking presence of a parent who is weighed down by burdens she cannot lift. Lily cannot define interest rates or balances, but she recognizes what they do. She watches her mother's expression narrow under their load. The voice hesitates but does not stop. She explains that sometimes she wakes at night to find light still glowing from the kitchen lamp. Her mother sits before the numbers, quiet but shaking. There is no financial term in Lily's lines, only truth glazed with innocence. She writes, "I think the numbers are being mean to Mama." That phrase turns Alistair's chest tight. It is truer than any report he has ever studied, more precise than columns of figures. Cruelty named not in markets but in a child's clarity. The request comes last, wrapped in this innocent frame. She asks, in halting phrasing, if he maybe has any extra numbers. Not coins, not notes, not an account. Just numbers, as though they were building blocks one could share out of a pile. Do you have some extra numbers you don't need? Because if you do, I think Mama could smile again. Her appeal is couched not in greed, not even in need for herself, but purely for her mother, whose sadness she carries like a stone in her small chest. The page holds steady in his hands. He sees the uneven letters, notices a spot near the bottom that is blurred faintly, maybe from dampness. Whether it was from a spill or a tear, he cannot tell. Each mistake, each smudge, makes the letter more human, more alive. In the sterile order of his office, the child's son, her bent lines, her imagined world of mean numbers take root. And for the first time in many seasons, Alistair Finch allows himself to feel that someone far beyond his fortress has reached him. Alistair's eyes slow over Lily's letter until one line makes him stop breathing altogether. Her sentences had been polite, even playful, with images that spun from a child's hands. But here, in the center, comes a phrase that does not belong in childhood at all. She writes that sometimes, when she can't sleep, she walks toward the kitchen and sees her mother with her head bowed, papers scattered wide across the table. She doesn't describe bills or notices. She doesn't understand those things yet. But she sees the tears. She writes in her careful letters that Mama cries when she looks at the numbers. Alistair leans forward, reading it again as if the words could change on a second pass. They remain fixed, soft and impossible to ignore. A child has witnessed the crack in an adult who tried to hide it. The numbers are being mean to Mama. The line rings like a bell in his chest. All the years he has spent hunched over sheets of figures, shaping fortunes or trimming losses, none have carried the sting that these simple words hold. A child's mind has framed the cruelty of debt and worry into language purer than any report. His gaze drifts from the page to his desk. Usually, the numbers that surround him hold firm, obedient, parts of systems he commands. Here, they are alive, hostile, tormenting a woman while her daughter stands witness. That shift turns his office colder than the thermostat could ever make it. Silence builds, pressing at his ears. And for once, he does not move toward another document, another file. Lily's letter does not end there. She hesitates, then pushes past the edge of timidity to make a small, devastating request. Do you have any extra numbers you don't need? She writes the question with a round innocence. Certain numbers are like crayons, plenty to pass around, some spares in every box. Her logic is clean. If the numbers in her kitchen are hurting her mom, maybe someone like him has kind ones to trade in their place. Alistair stares at the letters until his eyes blur. This is not a financial plea dressed in big words. It is not a request for handouts or favors. It is the child's translation of desperation. The hope that someone, somewhere, could shift the math and lift the weight from small shoulders. Something loosens in him. This fortress of glass and silence that once made him feel invincible now feels like a cage. Every surface mocks him with its emptiness, its refusal to hold anything personal. On his desk lie numbers that measure millions, yet faced at last with their true cost, he has never felt so powerless. He places the page down gently, as though any sudden movement might bruise the words themselves. His hand lingers, unwilling to let go. He knows within himself that a figure in his spreadsheets can vanish with one keystroke. But Lily's phrase, numbers being mean to Mama, has more authority than the annual report waiting just inches away. In the corners of his memory, he sees himself again, as a child. The letter he once wrote to someone who never answered. The sting of silence that seemed to confirm invisibility. That ghost rises now, demanding attention. If he lets hers go unanswered too, she may carry the same hurt. He cannot bear the thought. For a long moment he sits motionless, the city stretching endlessly beneath him, lights flickering like restless numbers in their own columns. His empire feels hollow, built tall yet empty beside one page from a child's notebook. When he finally exhales, it is with the knowledge that something irreversible has begun. This is no longer a curiosity sitting out of place on his desk. This is a summons. And he knows with absolute clarity. He has been moved in a way nothing in all his years of business ever could. Far from the glass tower and its hush of air conditioning, another scene unfolds. The kitchen is smaller than Alistair's conference table, its light dimmer, but it is alive. The counters hold plates, stacked from breakfast. A pot simmers faintly on the stove, and the overhead bulb hums in tired rhythm. A patch of wallpaper curls by the window, a silent note of a house worn but holding together. The room carries the sigh of everyday struggle, yet it also hums with the warmth of use. Shoes by the door, a scarf hanging crooked, the lived-in trail of a family. Lily sits at the wooden table, legs swinging, a notebook spread open before her. She has turned crayons sideways to shade a patch of paper, tongue pressed to her lip in concentration. The drawing is of a sun, much like the one at the top of her letter, round and bright, though the yellow wax is stubbed down to nothing. She pauses often, glancing toward the stove where her mother is stirring the sauce with one hand, while steadying herself against the counter with the other. That glance is filled with both love and worry. Children's eyes see more than adults ever want them to. Sarah, her mother, draws in a breath and straightens when she notices the child watching. Her shoulders ache from the shifts at work. Her mind thrums with the quiet chant of bills unpaid. But she smiles, even if fragile. "Almost done, sweetheart," she says softly, turning the spoon in slow circles. Her voice stretches to sound light. What she hides is the exhaustion carved deep around her eyes, the way anger of numbers has bent into fear. She keeps her back to the table longer than she must, pretending the sauce needs one more stir, simply to keep worry from her daughter's full view. But Lily notices anyway. She always notices. That is why she wrote the letter. Not out of childish curiosity or boredom, but from a determination only a child who desperately wants her mother to smile again can muster. She could not lift the papers stacked on the table. She could not decode the columns of due dates and amounts, but she could write. And she believed that if she sent words into the world, someone would answer. Tonight she watches her mother's hand tremble, just slightly, as it folds a dish towel. She presses her crayon harder, almost breaking it, as though color could protect her mother from all that weight. Crayons are crude tools against debt, but in her small hands they become a shield, a voice. The letter was just another picture, a different kind of drawing made with words. Now she waits, not knowing if it will reach anyone powerful enough to notice. In this kitchen, the contrast is sharp. Here, nothing gleams with polish. The floor tiles squeak, the clock tick is uneven. But where Alistair's fortress feels cold, this place is alive with heartbeat. Dishes clatter, scent of garlic fills the air, a draft rattles the curtain. It is not silence, it is sound and feeling entwined. Fragile, yes, but genuine. As the pot bubbles, Sarah moves wearily, yet keeps humming under her breath. Half tune, half determination. Lily listens, letting the tune calm her. The little girl folds her drawing closed, wondering if maybe, tonight, tomorrow, or someday soon, the numbers will loosen. She believes her letter is already on a journey, traveling hand to hand across the city, climbing tall towers. She believes in connection, though she does not name it that way. To her, it's just hope carried in an envelope. In one home high above streets, a man sits with her words pressed against his chest. In another, she eats dinner with her mother, hoping those words find kindness. Two worlds exist side by side, divided by distance and money, yet stitched closer now by an 8-year-old's handwriting and the stubborn glow of a crayon sun. Back in his office, Alistair spreads the letter across his desk once more. The sun in the corner seems to brighten against the flat gray light pouring through the windows. He thinks he has studied every word, but the page pulls him back. Once, twice, a third time. Each reading reveals something new. His polished eyes, trained to catch hidden costs in lines of reports, now catch tremors in handwriting. The way the strokes press harder at certain words, lighter at others. He notices at the bottom a blurred spot, darker than the rest, as though the paper had borne a drop of water. He tries not to assume, but the thought that it might be a tear pierces his chest. Suddenly, the document feels fragile, alive, as though Lily herself sat across from him, whispering everything she couldn't say aloud. The letter's honesty is brutal. No hedge, no disguise. Children do not know the grown-up art of softening truths. They write as they see. Lily wrote of her small world, then of her mother bowing under numbers. She had drawn no armor around those words, poured no excuses to soften them. The cracks arrive raw and sharp. And this lack of cover cleaves his composure in two. Alistair realizes how long his life has depended on distance. Reports carry weight only because they arrive stripped of feeling. Each figure he orders around works precisely because it never bleeds. Yet here, in blue-lined notebook paper, the barrier he has raised throughout decades does not hold. His chest feels tight. The percussion of his heartbeat rises against ribs like fists against a closed door. Images bloom, unwelcome. A child not yet 10, listening in dark hallways, seeing light spill under doors, hearing muffled crying. He knows because he remembers. The fatigue in his own mother's face long ago, when numbers and notices filled the kitchen. The memory rushes forward, shaking his breath. The letter has folded time, bridging his guarded present with the boy he had locked away. All around him, his office gleams. Chrome pens sit in alignment, reports stacked sharp. But inside, he unravels. His hand shakes against the edge of the paper, a tremor he cannot discipline away. The fortress of schedules and silence shows its first fissure. For so long, he has thought himself beyond reach, but this child's letter steals inside without permission. And then the tear breaks. Not a storm, only one clear track down his cheek, but enough to unmake years of control. It shocks him. Tears rarely belong to him, certainly not in daylight. Yet he cannot stop it. His mouth presses shut, but his chest heaves once. The sound of air moving through him feels loud in the quiet. Almost instinctively, he folds the paper not to hide it, but to protect it. He holds it near. His empire, his accounts, the work of industries, all of it feels ghostly compared to this weightless sheet. The truth is simple. A child out there believes he can answer. His heart stutters because maybe, after all, she is right. The tears come without permission. Not dramatic, not the kind that rack the body with sound, but quiet, relentless. They run a steady line down his face, each one an assault on the order he's built. He does not bother to wipe them away. For once in this fortress, he does not fight. Alistair sits at the edge of his chair, the letter balanced in his palms like something precious and breakable. The words no longer rest on paper. They move inside him. He blinks hard, trying to steady the tremble in his chest, but it only sharpens with every breath. He realizes in a painful rush that the whole empire he commands is powerless here. All the figures he has ever measured, all the towers and systems, cannot silence one child's unguarded question. The fortune that makes others bow before him feels useless against her description of sadness. One little girl has drawn back the curtain on his strength and shown it for what it is. Weight without warmth. What frightens him most is not the weakness spilling from his eyes, but the memory that explodes with it. He is no longer the man staring at spreadsheets. He is the boy at a kitchen table, watching numbers choke life out of his mother. He remembers her eyes rimmed red, her hands smoothing papers that could not be smoothed away. Her silence was the same as Sarah's silence in Lily's home. He remembers his own small fists pressed tight, helpless against the faceless cruelty of mathematics. The letter bends slightly in his grip as another drop falls onto it. He jerks gently, terrified he might blur her words altogether. She trusted him with those sentences, every one written as though a lifeline. The thought of destroying even a corner feels unbearable. So he lowers it onto the desk carefully, smoothing the page with the back of his hand, as though to apologize to her for the intrusion of his grief. In this moment, his office changes shape. The walls that had made him feel separate now close in. Shelves groan with reports he once treasured. Now they mock him, empty of meaning. His wide windows no longer frame victory, they frame distance. For years he has told himself that tears were indulgence, that progress came from shutting feeling out. But the fortress disarms him completely. Cold air cuts his skin. His own breath sounds like thunder in his ears. He is not a master here. He is a prisoner who has just seen the bars. The tears do not rage. They continue like a rhythm he cannot stop. They break down the silence more deeply than any voice could. Against every rule of his ordered life, Alistair Finch is undone by one small voice, written in crayon and crooked lines. His chest aches but also expands. It is both unbearable and necessary. For the first time in many years, he surrenders. He sees letters, but more than that, he sees a child, Lily. Her eyes too wise, her belief too fierce, and it wrecks him, utterly. The knock on his door startles him. He jerks upright, the flow of tears unhidden for the first time in decades. His assistant enters briskly, arms full of contracts requiring his signature. She steps halfway across the rich carpet before she sees him. Half a step more, and she notices his face. The man who maps the course of markets sits, shoulders low, cheeks wet. The papers in her hands dip slightly, her body pausing with instinctive respect. For a moment, silence connects them. He grips the edge of the letter. She glances at it, but does not dare ask. His throat tightens. He raises one hand, palm outward, a simple gesture. The wave dismisses her questions before they form. A clear message. This moment does not belong to business. It belongs to something private, something that can't be spoken in quarterly terms. She nods once, solemnly, and sets the stack of contracts quietly on the nearest table. Then she turns. At the door, she hesitates, but his bowed head tells her enough. She leaves without a word. He exhales slowly, realizing how rare it is to show weakness, even to walls, let alone to people. The door clicks shut. He is alone again. But the fortress feels changed. The letter in his hand glows almost wholly, an intrusion from beyond the walls. It no longer resembles paper at all. It feels like a sacred object, something offered not by choice, but by trust. In that fragile silence, a new certainty forms. He has lived by strategy. He has sculpted decisions with analysis, outcomes predicted 3 moves ahead. But this moment does not call for strategy. It calls for something raw, straight, uncalculated. He knows it as surely as he knows his own name. The decision arrives like a strike of lightning, swift and irreversible. He will answer, not as a corporation, not as a headline or a charity story. He will answer as himself, a man who once needed an answer and never got one. He will not let history repeat through her. He places the letter inside his jacket pocket, directly over his heart. The weight is almost nothing, yet he feels heavier with purpose. A child has reached for him. Not 1,000 shareholders, not competitors, not governments. One child. Everything else in the world narrows into that truth. He wipes his face at last, though the traces remain in his eyes. When he next looks at the city sprawled below, it does not seem as untouchable. For the first time, he recognizes that all his work, all the structures he stands upon, exist only to serve. What meaning do they hold if they cannot shield a mother crying at her table, or a daughter fighting with crayons against invisible cruelty? The answer is simple. None. And so his course is clear. He will not shelve that letter. He will not write a polite decline. He will go to her. He will carry his response in person. Raw humanity, not policy, will guide his hand. In that moment, Alistair Finch stands within the fortress he built for his own armor and feels its walls crumble. Yet the ruin is not loss, it is possibility. Tears have cleared something deeper than glass windows or balance sheets ever could. For once, the CEO rises not as master of numbers, but as a man who has been claimed by a child's plea. His empire waits outside the door. But in his heart, the mission has already changed. Alistair remains by the window long after his assistant has gone. The skyline flickers with evening lights, each one a story stacked upon another. None of them knowing that, in this tower, a man is holding a child's plea like a compass. His pulse has steadied now, though his chest still aches. The letter sits folded over his heart. For the first time in years, he feels certain his next act will not be run through analysts or publicists. This clarity surprises him. Usually, decisions swirl through countless filters. What will it mean for the brand, for the shareholders, for projection lines on graphs months ahead? Yet Lily's words bypass all of that. She had not written to a corporation, had not even known what that meant. She wrote to a man, naming him Mr., and asking for extra numbers. If he were to answer her with a press release or a fund, it would betray the simplicity of her request. His mind tempts him with an easy path. After all, his company has charity arms. Entire departments exist to handle donations and organize campaigns. He could simply forward the letter, sign a large check, and never involve himself again. No doubt it would make a fine headline. The CEO with tears in his eyes decides to fund another program. 1,000 voices would praise him. But his gut twists. He knows that isn't the point, because this isn't about charity. It isn't about poster boards printed with company logos next to children. Lily did not ask for a campaign. She asked if he could spare her some numbers so her mom could smile again. Her single voice did what entire departments never managed. It pierced his defenses and reminded him of his own silent letter years ago. He remembers how being overlooked felt worse than the struggle itself. The sense that his quiet question didn't deserve an answer. So no, this will not be swept into a philanthropic budget line. It cannot become another statistic. What stands before him is not a case, not a file. It is one child, writing by lamplight, drawing a sun in the corner of the page because she believed someone far away might still feel warmth from it. He turns from the window and presses the intercom for his assistant. His voice is low, steadier now, but touched with something new. Resolve that carries no edge of business jargon. When she enters, he is already holding the letter out to her with great care, as though it might bruise. "Find them," he says. Simple, direct, no speech, no debrief, just 2 words, spoken with the firm weight of command stripped of corporate detachment. His assistant blinks, startled. She knows her employer for eloquent directives and meticulous instructions. Yet here he offers only raw intent. She accepts the folded page with careful hands, sensing that this request is unlike any other. For a moment she hesitates, searching his face, as if to ask what precisely finding them means. But the steady look in his eyes tells her everything. This is not about headlines, not about strategy. It is a private call to action. She nods once, solemnly, and leaves with the envelope pressed to her chest. Alistair sinks back into his chair. A strange calm settles over him. The decision is made. It requires no further justification. His fortress, once designed to keep the world at bay, has turned outward. All the vast engine of his company exists for profits. But today, that same machine has a new task. Locate one little girl and her mother. He doesn't even know the exact path toward them yet, but he trusts it will unfold. Because this is not philanthropy, and it is not business. It is just an answer to a letter. The request is simple, but its weight is unlike anything his assistant has carried before. She is used to confidential mergers and private negotiations, but now she holds a school notebook letter, folded soft at the edges, smudged with crayon. The command had been clear. Find them. 2 words, nothing more. And yet it is the most human order he has ever given. She begins quietly, sifting the sparse clues on the page. A name, Lily. A mention of a cracked sidewalk on her street. A swing that squeaks. A cat that follows her home. These are not corporate identifiers. They are fragments of a child's map to her world. To trace them is no ordinary assignment. Still, she begins. She lays the letter flat beneath a warm desk lamp. Each detail is listed carefully, like puzzle pieces. 3rd grade classroom, a teacher who likes her drawings. A mother named only Mama. Nothing an algorithm could crunch with precision. But the assistant has learned patience in years of service. And where the letter leaves gaps, she relies on instinct. The first step is simple legwork. School districts are narrowed. A note about the neighbor who waters flowers too much gives her a starting point. Public property records show streets notorious for water use complaints. She traces those dots gently, sensing the humanity beneath them. Piece by piece, the vague world of Lily's letter grows more defined. What surprises her is how quickly she begins investing herself. This is no longer only her employer's mystery. It has become her own, as though the child had written directly to her as well. She hears in Lily's lines the voice of a niece she once helped with homework, the tone of a shy student handwriting her first essay. Each scrap of detail becomes urgent. Days pass in quiet effort. The search does not announce itself. No reporters tail it, no press release explains it. The work folds into the rhythm of ordinary business, hidden yet fierce. Behind closed doors, she makes phone calls, treads carefully so no questions spiral into rumors. If anyone asks, she is handling a personal request. And that part is true. At last, a match appears. A modest street, cracked pavement, a cluster of older duplexes where children's bikes crowd the lawns. The records list a young woman named Sarah on one lease. A mother, single, working shifts noted in payroll logs from a nearby grocery. The assistant stares at the printout, heart tightening. The story is real now, no longer scribbles on a page. She drives past once, quietly, to see the house for herself. Curtains thin from washing, a porch light flickering. Outside sits a stray cat on the steps, calm and fearless as though it belongs. She does not linger long, but the glimpse is enough. She returns to the tower certain. Placing the file gently before her employer, she meets his eyes. "We found them." Her voice trembles slightly despite herself. He does not ask for confirmation. No double check, no hesitation. He sees the tremor in her words and knows all he needs. In that instant, the barrier between a story and flesh collapses. Lily and her mother are no longer abstractions drawn in crayon. They have an address, a door, a life lived beneath a roof that leaks. The search is complete, and with its end comes a heavier beginning. Because now, Alistair Finch must decide what to do with the truth that has been placed in his hands. Alistair leans back slowly in his chair, the faint rustle of the city pressing against the windows. In front of him lies the report from his assistant, an address, a profile that makes the letter flesh and blood. He has found them. Lily and her mother are no longer distant voices. They are a door, a porch step, a place on a street he can walk. Normally, this would be the instant for a plan. He has built an empire precisely because he never acts without a map. Teams are assembled, communication streamlined, outcomes projected. That is how success is harvested, through control of every detail. And now his habits push him again. Create a media strategy. Assign his public relations staff. Fold the act into the philanthropy division. After all, the optics could not be better. Headlines would shine. CEO answers child's plea, but even in the thought, he recoils. He sees Lily's handwriting, uneven and determined. She hadn't written to the company. She hadn't meant for her words to become a spectacle. She had written to him. Her dear mister could have aimed at anyone, yet landed here, pierced him more than any board demand ever has. To turn it into a campaign would be to betray it. He exhales, rubbing at his temples. All of his instincts, honed by years of industry, scream for the safety of protocol. Yet another voice rises louder. The boy inside him, who once sent a letter of his own, never answered. That silence had carved him into stone. And here, standing at the border of another child's hope, he refuses to let his silence carve her too. So he begins stripping possibilities away. No charity gala, no press release. No fundraiser engineered on stage with lights. He imagines Lily's face watching news anchors speak her name. Strangers handling her pain like material. His jaw clenches. She deserves dignity, not spectacle. For the first time in years, Alistair contemplates showing up without an entourage, without armor. He knows how little sense it makes. What if they do not want him at their door? What if his presence unsettles them rather than comforts? Yet he cannot stomach the thought of sending another hand in his place. It must be him. She trusted him with her words. He must honor her with his presence. A plan begins to take form, but not the kind written in projections. A personal plan. He will go himself, quietly. No driver, no cameras, not the CEO in polished glass, but a man holding a child's crayon sun-folded against his chest. He will walk through their doorway with nothing more than honesty. I received your letter. The more he imagines it, the clearer he feels. For once, the decision is not tangled in risk. It is simple, unshakable, clear as a bell. He knows exactly what to do, even if his corporate world will never understand it. He does not need their understanding. He needs only to honor the letter. He paces slowly to the window, resting one palm against the cold glass. The city glitters back at him, countless towers like his own. Cities are networks of numbers, each light another equation. And yet, beyond all of them, in a modest home with wallpaper curling at the edges, a mother and her daughter sit unaware that their letter now rests in the heart of a fortress. The contrast is staggering, yet it also heals. He sees that perhaps the towers were never the point. Perhaps all along leadership was waiting for this moment, the courage to kneel at a kitchen table far smaller than his own. Alistair turns back, crossing to his desk. The files of pending decisions clutter its surface, but he sweeps them into a neat pile and sets them aside. Only one page remains, the letter he now knows by heart. He slides it into his inside pocket. He feels its weight press gently against him like a promise. Tomorrow he will go. Not as Finch the strategist, nor as the public figure the world rehearses. Tomorrow he will go as Alistair, the man who chose to answer when a little girl dared to ask whether anyone had spare numbers for her mother. For the first time since the letter arrived, the fortress around him feels like it may hold warmth. Not because it changed, but because he finally has. The decision, at last, is made. The porch creaked beneath his shoes as Alistair Finch shifted his weight, staring at the modest front door. For a man who had spent his life behind glass walls and polished steel, this wooden step felt more treacherous than any boardroom negotiation. The house stood quietly on a street lined with weary maples, their leaves brown at the edges. A curtain flinched slightly at one window. He knew they knew someone was there. He closed his eyes for a breath, steadying the tremor in his chest, and lifted his hand to knock. The sound was small, nothing like the sure gavel cracks his fists had made at business tables. Here, the knock carried hesitation, almost apology. For a long second, there was no answer. The hum of the neighborhood pressed in. Children's voices down the block, a dog barking, the faint whir of a neighbor's lawnmower trimming at dusk. Then the latch clicked. The door opened. Sarah stood framed in the doorway. Her hair was pulled back in a quick tie, stray strands escaping. Her sweater carried a faint flour mark at the elbow. The look in her eyes fell first on the sharpness of his suit, the polished shoes, the figure of a man foreign to a street like this. Wariness rose instantly, her shoulders hardening, as though to block whatever intrusion he represented. "Can I help you?" she asked with a guarded tone. Alistair's voice was softer than he expected. "I'm Alistair," he said. His hand opened, empty, palm forward. "I received your daughter's letter." Silence. Her body froze at the word letter. Doubt trembled across her eyes, quickly replaced by alarm. She half turned, shielding the room behind her as though to protect it from exposure. "What letter?" she asked, suspicion sharpening the syllables. Behind her, small movement, a head peeking around her side. Two brown eyes wide with curiosity, a fringe of hair falling over the forehead. Lily. The sight rooted him to the step. She was smaller than he imagined, legs thin, hands gripping her mother's sweater as anchor. She stared at him with the cautious bravery children carry when they know something important is happening. Sarah felt her daughter pressing close and tried to edge the door shut, but Alistair lifted the paper gently from his pocket. He unfolded it with care. The sun drew itself out in orange crayon, bright even in the dim shadow of the porch. "This one," he said. It reached me. The tension in her face broke, confusion rushing in. She recognized the lines, the handwriting. She reached out instinctively, fingertips brushing the corner of the page, as though checking it was real. "You," she started, voice low with disbelief. "You actually got it?" Alistair nodded solemnly. His throat threatened to close, but he held her gaze steady. "I did. And I came to answer." Lily's grip on her mother loosened. She tilted her head, eyes fixed on him with a spark of anticipation. Sarah stepped aside, hesitantly, signaling him into the small home. Inside, the living room carried the gentle mess of family life. A knitted throw sagged over the back of a couch. A stack of school books leaned tiredly against the wall. The air smelled faintly of tomato sauce and pencil shavings. The contrast struck him with force. Every surface was alive, unlike the sterile order he had known for so long. He felt the weight of his suit coat, too heavy here, as if polished fabric did not belong among worn cushions and chipped mugs. Sarah folded her arms and sank into a chair, still wary but softened by the surreal presence of her daughter's letter now returned. Lily curled onto the couch edge, her eyes never leaving his face. He lowered himself slowly onto the seat across from them, knees awkward, posture unsure. For once, he did not have authority to stand behind. He was simply a man at someone else's table. "I'm not here with reporters," he said carefully, "or funds already drawn. I'm only here because Lily wrote to me. And I wanted you to know she was heard." Sarah's lips parted, trembling faintly as she tried to reconcile unimaginable reality. Exhaustion lined her expression, but behind it glimmered a fragile gratitude she could not form into words yet. Lily fidgeted, leaning forward, then whispering to her mother, "See? I told you someone might listen." The room fell quiet again. Alistair looked between them, mother and daughter, and felt for the first time the distance between his world and theirs shrink to a breath. This visit was not negotiation, not transaction. It was bridge building, plank by plank, eye to eye. Sarah finally exhaled, shaking her head softly as though marveling at the absurdity. "I don't understand why you came," she admitted. "Because once," he answered gently, "I wrote too. And no one came." Her eyes widened. The shadows in the corners of the room felt lighter. She studied him with a different kind of wariness now. Not suspicion, but dawning belief. And in that moment, the visit rooted itself not in charity, but in shared humanity. The door gave a quiet click behind them, leaving the three in the small living room. Alistair sat forward in his chair, knees bent, suit creased where it touched the worn fabric. Across from him, Sarah kept her arms folded tightly as though bracing herself. Lily, half curled at one end of the couch, clutched a pillow almost bigger than she was. The room itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting to know what would happen next. Sarah broke the silence first. "I don't know why you're here." Her voice was flat, tired, carrying layers of suspicion that had nothing to do with this stranger alone, but with the years that wore her down. "You say you got her letter, but letters don't reach men like you." "Not here." Alistair lowered his eyes to the page still resting in his hands. And yet it did. He placed it carefully on the low table between them, smoothing the fold marks. His fingers lingered on the childish sun, his touch deliberate, slow. "I can't explain how or why it reached me. Only that it did, and that I read every word." The tension around Sarah's mouth slackened, just a fraction. Her gaze fell to the page, recognition shadowing her features. She reached out for a moment, brushing the paper with her fingertips as though confirming again it was the same one that had left her home. She wasn't supposed to... Her voice faltered. She gets these ideas. I told her the world doesn't work like that, but it worked once, Alistair said softly. This time. Lily's eyes darted between them. She sat up straighter, hope flickering in her small frame. "You read it?" she asked, almost whispering, her little voice trembling with the courage to intrude. Alistair leaned slightly toward her, lowering his tone so it matched her timid pitch. "I did. I read it many times." Her lips curved shyly before she pressed them together, hiding the smile. Sarah ran a hand through her hair, shaking her head in disbelief. "I'm sorry she bothered you," she said, still stuck in apology. "It's just, we've been trying to get through. Work hours, bills stacked too high. She sees more than she should. I thought, maybe if I kept it quiet, she wouldn't notice." "She notices," Alistair said gently, meeting her eyes. "She notices because she loves you." That's what lives in every line of this letter. Not complaint, not want for herself, only worry for her mother. Sarah's eyes shuddered, pulling away, turning toward the carpet. His words pressed too close to tender truth. "It's complicated," she whispered. "I'm listening," he replied. He did not pitch his voice with the command of a CEO. He simply opened it, patient, unguarded. "Not as a business problem, as your story." The room quieted again. The ticking of the wall clock filled the space. Sarah's chest rose and fell, defensive phrases knotting on her tongue. But when she looked sideways at Lily, her daughter gripping a pillow, face open and bright because she believed something might change, the knots eased. She sighed, shoulders sinking. "I lost my steady job 2 years ago," she began haltingly. "Since then, it's been shifts wherever I can. Grocery store nights, cleaning offices, nothing that lasts long enough to build back up. Bills waited for no one. And then her doctor visits came. Tests, medicines. She waved her hand like smoke. Numbers on papers piling faster than I could chase them. Her voice cracked and she looked away. She hated that her tears might show. I tried to keep the worry after she went to bed, but kids don't miss much. Alistair nodded solemnly. They don't. You see me failing, she said sharply, suddenly defensive again. But we've managed. I've kept our home, kept her fed, kept her safe. I've done everything I can to protect her. She wanted more than I could give. He leaned forward, earnest. I don't see failure, Sarah. I see endurance. She sees it too. That's what gave her words such strength. She didn't write because she doesn't believe in you. She wrote because she does. The conviction in his voice broke something. Sarah's lips trembled, eyes glistening. She bit down hard on the inside of her cheek, steadying herself. Finally, she shook her head slowly. Astonishment colored her tone. I can't believe I'm sitting here, hearing this. I thought her letter would vanish into a bin, like everything else we try. I never imagined. That's because the world rarely lets letters like these through, he said softly. He tapped the page once, reverent. But this one forced its way in. Sarah pressed her palms against her forehead, as if gathering pieces of herself back together. I don't understand why you care. You could ignore this. Men in glass towers do. Alistair thought of the boy he once was, of the silence that bruised him when his letter found no ear. He let the truth settle before speaking. Because I know what silence feels like. And I refuse to let her grow up inside it. The room absorbed his words. Lily glanced between them, wide-eyed, sensing, without fully understanding, that something important had just been spoken. The living room's clutter, the patched sofa, the hum of the fridge, everything seemed hushed beneath the weight of shared honesty. For the first time since his knock at their door, Sarah allowed herself to meet his gaze without armor. She studied him, searching for deception or pity. Finding neither, she exhaled raggedly and whispered, Then tell me, why are you really here? Alistair looked from mother to daughter, then back again. Because you have a remarkable daughter, and she asked me to listen. I came so you would know I did. The air in the living room stayed taut after Sarah's last words. Tension threaded into the quiet hum of the refrigerator. Alistair leaned forward, his hands folded, elbows resting lightly on his knees. The weight of the decision inside him settled. This was the moment he had rehearsed in silence, not with scripts, not with strategies, but with his heart. He cleared his throat, choosing each syllable slowly. I didn't come here to offer charity, he began, steady but soft. Sarah tensed at the word, her shoulders lifting in quiet defense. Before she could speak, he continued. And I didn't come to write a check, vanish, and frame it as generosity. That doesn't honor what this letter was. He tapped gently on the paper between them. I'm here to offer something real, something that lasts. Her eyes narrowed, cautious. What do you mean by real? He searched her expression, careful not to overstep. I mean partnership. A solution that sees you as capable, not as a problem to be solved. What Lily asked for wasn't pity, and what you've carried is worth respect. He paused, then let the words breathe before adding, I'd like you to work with me. At my company. Sarah blinked. Surprise flickered, disbelief quickly chasing it. Work? For you? She let out a short laugh, edged with exhaustion. Look, I appreciate the idea, but men like you don't hire women like me. I've been mopping offices at night, stocking shelves. I don't have a degree. I barely have hours to myself because of shifts. And your world is... She gestured vaguely around. 40th floor stuff. Alistair's expression softened, though his tone stayed firm. Sarah, I've run my company on the belief that numbers told the whole story. They don't. People do. I've built towers of profit, but they're brittle if the people holding them up are breaking. Your resilience, your ability to stretch and keep going when systems tried to bury you, that's strength I want in my company. Not hidden in late-night sweeping shifts. Heard. Valued. She shook her head slowly, unsure whether to scoff or cry. And what, you'll just fix the everything? My debts, her treatments. She gestured again, frustrated. That's money, sir. That's not solved by kind words. I know, he whispered, and his hand went to his pocket where the letter lay. That's why there's more. I can make sure the medical bills stop strangling you. Not as a gift, not with your heart chained by gratitude, but formally, through a company relief program. Call it an investment in my people. Every dollar that cages you cages your potential. Clearing that gives you the space to rise. He leaned closer. These aren't scraps, Sarah. This is a proposal. I will cover the costs through a program written into our structure, and I will place you in a position with steady hours, ones that match a single mother's life. You'll have security without having to explain your worth to managers who never looked past a resume. Her lips parted, then closed. She stared at him, cautious hope warring with disbelief. And why? Why me? His voice steadied. Because your daughter asked. Because she believes someone in the world might hand her mom better numbers. And because she reminded me that the power we hold means nothing if it doesn't serve souls like hers. I'm tired of systems that grind people down. If I can shift even one, I must start here. With you. The silence expanded. Sarah's eyes glimmered, though her body still braced. You're saying this isn't charity? That I'd earn it? Yes. Earned. Deserved. Not a handout, but a recognition of who you already are. If you step toward this, he gestured gently, you'll be walking into a partnership. Me with my resources, you with your resilience. Together, we change not just balance sheets, but lives. Her hand rose to her mouth, pressing against trembling lips. Tears welled, but she fought them back. I've waited years to be seen, she whispered, and it took my 8-year-old crayon son to bring you to my door. Alistair looked at Lily then, smiling weakly. She may be small, but she knows the truth better than most of us. Lily leaned forward, eyes earnest. She didn't understand every word, but she caught enough. She glanced between them, her voice quick and certain. So Mama won't have to cry at the table anymore? He met her eyes, nodding solemnly. That's the plan, Lily. That's the promise. For a long time, no one spoke. The room hummed with a hope too fragile to handle, yet too strong to break. Sarah closed her eyes once, then opened them again, looking at him with rawness. And I'll say yes. Not for charity. For partnership. Alistair exhaled, shoulders unclenching. The letter had given him direction, and now the first step of its answer had been spoken. Not numbers in a column, but the beginning of a bond. The room held the hush of promises not yet sealed. Sarah leaned back in her chair, visibly shaken, her eyes shining with disbelief that had softened into something closer to possibility. Yet in the warmth of that fragile moment, another voice rose, the smallest, but the one that had carried this whole meeting into being. Lily shifted on the couch where she had sat quiet through most of her mother's conversation with the stranger in the suit. Her small hand smoothed the edge of the pillow she clutched. At last, with the honesty only a child could bring, she turned her face up toward him. Her brown eyes held none of the guarded suspicion her mother had worn. They carried only a question, heavy with all the hope she had dared to pour into crooked letters. Did you bring extra numbers? The silence that followed was thick, trembling with meaning. Sarah flinched slightly at the words, half embarrassed, half crushed that her daughter's private phrasing was now spoken aloud. She glanced at Alistair, expecting, perhaps, that this moment might shame or unsettle the stranger who had walked into their lives. But instead she saw him freeze. The man who had dictated boardrooms with sharp precision bent, visibly undone by the simplicity of a child's words. The question pressed like a weight against his chest. He shifted forward on his chair, setting aside every fragment of formality his posture once held. Slowly, carefully, as though approaching the heart of her letter itself, he knelt down beside her couch so that his tall figure shrank to meet Lily's gaze. His knees bent against the worn carpet without resentment of its stains. I did, he whispered, his tone low and rich with feeling. He placed a hand against his pocket, where the folded letter still rested close to his heart. He met her eyes not as a CEO, but as a man haunted by his boyhood silence and healed now by her brave question. "I brought all the numbers you need." Lily studied him as if weighing the truth behind the words. Her brow narrowed slightly, then relaxed. A smile, rare and shy, began to spread across her face. Her small fingers reached toward him tentatively, brushing against the fabric of his sleeve. It was the soft touch of a child testing whether hope was solid. Sarah covered her mouth with her hand, stifling a sob. The sound escaped anyway, fragile and broken. To her, the words meant life tugged from despair. To Lily, they meant that the letter had not been lost in the void. Someone had answered. Someone had shown up with more than sympathy, with a promise. Alistair stayed kneeling for a long moment, his body hunched, his eyes glistening. "You are brave," he told her softly. "Braver than I was at your age." "You asked when most would stay quiet." Lily tilted her head, unsure how much of that she could grasp, but she liked the way his voice softened for her. She leaned closer, whispering, "Then Mama's face can get big again?" The words pierced him as deeply as the letter itself. Her description of sadness made whole again, visible in a child's lens. He nodded solemnly. "Yes, that's exactly what we'll do." The small girl exhaled, and her entire posture eased, as though the invisible stone she carried in her chest had been lifted away. She pressed her cheek against the pillow, watching him with calmness now instead of worry. The weight of that exchange filled the room. Sarah lowered her own defenses at last, her hand down from her mouth, her tears unsheltered. For years she had borne the stoic mask of survival. Tonight she allowed her daughter to see her cry. Because these were not tears of despair, but of relief. Alistair stood slowly, his knees creaking, his body remembering its size again. Yet something had changed. The fortress of authority that once defined him no longer clung to his figure. He felt small in this room, and that smallness felt right. Lily's question had stripped him bare. He would carry those words far beyond this evening, a vow etched deeper than any document. And though the crayon sun on her letter remained childlike, he understood now its hidden wisdom. She had drawn light into a world where numbers were cruel. Tonight, that light pressed into his heart. He knew without doubt, her question was not only for her mother. It had been for him too. A plea for him to remember the measure of true wealth. When Alistair stepped back onto the modest porch, night had fallen. The flickering street light hummed overhead, swaying with the breeze. His polished shoes struck the boards softly as he closed the door behind him. He stood there still for a long, slow breath, staring out at the quiet street, and realized that something inside him had shifted so deeply he would never return unchanged. The fortress had cracked open the moment the letter reached him. By tonight, standing in front of a small home where laughter and tears blurred together in one fragile evening, the fortress no longer existed. A burden slipped from his shoulders, invisible yet immense. The armor that once felt necessary had peeled away, leaving only a man who had chosen to answer. He walked down the steps toward his car parked at the curb. The vehicle's sleek surface reflected the amber glow of the street lamp, but even its polished power looked alien to him now. He opened the door and sank into the seat with a weariness that was not exhaustion, but release. As the driver quietly asked where to go, Alistair simply said, "Home." The ride back toward the skyline was hushed. Across the windows, the city glittered with its cruel abundance, lights like endless codes written into the air. Alistair watched them with eyes newly awake. He used to see these towers as markers of conquest, each one a proof of success. Now, from the back seat, he saw them as fragile shells housing countless Sarahs and Lilies. Kitchens where numbers on paper pressed people's faces small. He pressed a hand to his chest, fingers brushing the outline of the folded letter in his pocket. Even through layers of fabric, it felt warm, as though the crayon sun shone inside it. Over his heart, it rested not as a relic, but as a constant companion. Every breath lifted it, every beat of his pulse pressed against it. For the rest of the ride, he said nothing. Silence revealed more to him than words could. He remembered his own boyhood letter, the one unanswered. He thought of how the absence of reply had carved lines of suspicion through his spirit. And he thought of Lily's eyes widening when he said he had brought the numbers. That contrast took his breath. One moment of presence had rewritten decades of absence. As his car slipped into the tower's underground garage, his reflection flickered in the dark window. Yet, it startled him. He did not see the same man who had left this morning. The gaze looking back was softened, not diminished, but deepened. His jawline carried tension still, but this time not from control, from resolve. When he rode the elevator up, the mirrored wall showed him again, and he barely recognized the figure. Yes, he wore the same suit, but the man inside was altered. He felt the weight of duty differently now. Not to investors, not to columns of profit, to people. To one child's son. He stepped back into his towering office, the walls gleaming, the air sterile as ever. Yet it did not feel the same. Where before the silence had exalted him, now it pressed with emptiness. He crossed the room and sat at his desk, but the polished surface mocked him, too clean for the crayon wisdom he now carried. He opened a drawer and removed the frame that once held a sterile certificate of recognition. He set it aside and pictured replacing it with something else. Something earned not by markets, but by moments. Lily's drawing, perhaps. The idea made him smile faintly. He leaned back, looking out over the city. His empire spread before him, but in his chest, another empire had begun. One unseen. The true transformation was not a collapse, but a redirection. He no longer asked how many profits he could accumulate. He asked instead what weight his numbers might lift from bowed shoulders. The next morning he would wake and draft policies not from reports but from memory, of a mother trembling over bills, of a child gripping hope in crayons. He would begin carving new systems, family-friendly hours, relief for sudden crises, voices listened to instead of silenced. But for now, alone in the glass fortress, Alistair closed his eyes and pressed the letter close against his chest. He whispered to the still room, "I am not the same." And in that confession, he found peace. The weeks after his visit did not settle back into routine. Instead, they swelled forward with a kind of quiet momentum. Alistair walked through the doors of his company tower, aware that the air itself felt different. He carried Lily's letter pressed still against his chest, but now it spoke not only as a memory, it had become a mission. At the next board meeting, the long table lined with immaculate folders waited for his address. His executives expected numbers, forecasts, projections. Instead, when he rose, he placed a single sheet of paper before him. Not a report, but Lily's letter. He did not hand it around. He simply let them see the worn edges, the crayon at the corner. "This," he told them, his voice low but steady, "is why we change." They were stunned. Some shifted in their seats, nervous, convinced at first that this must be a metaphor for another initiative. But as he spoke of Sarah and Lily, not full names, not details that would expose them, only the humanity in their story, the tone in the room shifted. He explained that the company that once thrived on extraction must learn to shelter, that numbers could crush as easily as they could build. He did not ask for permission. He stated a new course. The first ripples took shape as policies. He ordered the formation of an emergency relief fund for employees facing crises, medical, housing, sudden losses, so none would bear the battle at kitchen tables alone. Work schedules gained flexibility, built around the lives of workers, rather than forcing families to bend until breaking. For parents, hours could adjust. For caretakers, structures could soften. When departments resisted, clinging to efficiency models, Alistair told them efficiency meant nothing if it hollowed people. He spoke of endurance as the truest asset. Managers who once valued late hours and cold loyalty now had to reckon with balance as a requirement. The fortress was opening its gates. Employees noticed quickly. Stories surfaced of small reliefs. A worker able to take paid hours when his child was in hospital. A mother spared from eviction through the backstop fund. Word spread in hallways, in break rooms, in hushed thanks during shifts. They did not know its root. They did not know of Lily by name. But they felt the shift. The company no longer seemed a tower of glass alone. It began to resemble a net of support. Alistair himself felt the transformation most in the silences. Where meetings had once ended in cold conclusions, now he lingered to ask voices usually unheard what they needed. He listened. He did not always provide immediate solutions, but he bore their words without dismissal. And gradually, trust returned, eyes long dulled. He shared Lily's influence only sparingly. At one executive retreat, his final words landed soft yet unwavering. Leadership is not about the height of our towers. It is about how many children sleep easier because we exist. The silence that followed was heavier than applause. It was conviction sinking in. In time, competitors took notice. Journalists speculated at the shift. Profit margins remained steady, yet employee satisfaction rose sharply. But Alistair no longer chased headlines. He let the company's quieter reforms ripple through neighborhoods, homes, lives. He measured success not just in quarterly returns, but in the absence of mothers weeping in kitchens. Each evening he returned to his fortress-turned-listening post, the frame certificate replaced by something far humbler. On the wall behind his desk, where power once displayed itself, a child's drawing hung. A son scrawled wild and radiant, reminding him daily that numbers must never grow cruel. The ripple began there and spread outward, reforming not only the company, but the man at its head. In Alistair's office, sunlight poured through the vast windows, bouncing off the glass frame that now held Lily's drawing. The orange rays of her crayon sun glowed, casting warmth across the sterile room. Beneath it, two stick figures held hands, standing small but unshaken in their patch of light. Beside the picture, a new letter rested in another frame. This one, written with steadier spelling and tidier lines, was her thank you note. His desk, once a fortress, had melted into something different, a place of connection. Each morning, that sun reminded him this was the measure of his wealth. One letter changed everything. Not because it carried exact instructions or detailed strategies, but because it carried innocence and love pressed into crooked handwriting. A child's small request tore through a fortress that whole industries could not touch. And in its wake, an empire shifted. Perhaps you carry your own fortress walls, high and precise, thinking nothing can reach inside. But remember Lily's letter. Remember that sometimes the smallest voices hold the greatest clarity. Numbers bend to will, but tenderness bends hearts. That is true power, the kind that redraws maps in silence more than declarations. For Alistair, the lesson was not about figures saved, but about faces unburdened. He learned that the worth of leadership is not tallied in reports, but reflected in the widening eyes of a child discovering that hope was not folly. Each of us, in whatever towers we inhabit, might be asked the same question she asked. Do we keep our excess numbers locked in vaults? Or do we place them where they turn tears back into smiles? You who listen now, you might not run a company. You might not control balance sheets that stretch through cities. But every person holds something others need. Time, kindness, presence, courage. Where someone trembles under weight, you may carry a fragment away. You may, like Alistair, decide that silence is no answer. If Lily's crayon sun reached across this story and rested in your heart, don't let it fade. Hold it as compass. Consider who around you waits unseen, whose soft knock may need your reply. One small act, one letter answered, can ripple through lives, companies, even generations. That truth belongs not to CEOs, but to all of us. If this story found you, stay close. Subscribe here, so when the next quiet tale of courage arrives, you will be the one to hear it. Because stories like these aren't distant. They're waiting on porches, tucked into envelopes, scrawled in children's hands. And together, we can keep answering them.